It was Christmas Eve, 2009. I was 18 years old and working at CVS. Unfortunately, I got stuck with a closing shift on Christmas Eve, meaning I'd be the only one there until midnight. I was considering quitting over it, but my parents weren't for that. The CVS was 5 miles from my house, on a rather quiet corner of a dead-end street. During the day, it would normally be busy, at least busy enough to stay in business, but past 8 o'clock, it would be uncommon to see any customers. On Christmas Eve night, I didn't expect to see a single soul past 8 o'clock. My shift started at 4, and it was surprisingly busy for the first few hours. As I expected, past 8 o'clock, it really started to die down. The pharmacy closed at 10 tonight for Christmas Eve. Unfortunately, that meant I'd be alone at the register up front for 2 hours. Plus, I had a crush on the girl who was working the pharmacy, and we were talking most of the time when the store was empty. So, I was upset when she left. An hour went by, and I only rang up one customer. By 11 o'clock, I was already getting excited for my shift to end. I'd been the only one in the entire building besides one customer for the past hour, and I was losing my mind. Suddenly, there was a very slight tap on the window. It didn't sound intentional. It sounded more like somebody's zipper accidentally scraped against the glass. I turned to look out the window and saw a man out there, heavy coat and hood over his head, baggy jeans, and black boots. He was staring right at me. A few seconds after he realized I noticed him, he walked over to the entrance and entered the store. He stared at me as he walked past and down one of the aisles before disappearing behind the shelves. Then, 5 minutes later, the tapping noise began again. It sounded like it was coming from one of the aisles. I walked a little to the right behind the counter just to check down the aisle. Nobody was there. The tapping was so consistent and deliberate that I knew it was the man making the noise, but where was it coming from? I didn't know, but I had a sudden urge to go to the bathroom. The only problem was I wasn't supposed to go to the bathroom when there was a customer in the store, and I was alone with him. 10 minutes or so passed, and I didn't see the customer, but I would occasionally hear the weird tapping noise coming from one of the aisles. It got to the point that I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out from behind the counter and called out, excuse me? I started walking around the aisles looking for the man who had walked in. He was nowhere to be seen, but every aisle I entered, I would hear noises coming from the next aisle over. I walked down the candy aisle and heard some of the sleigh bells jingling on the other side of the shelf, like someone was intentionally shaking them. I tried to peek through the tiny holes in the shelves to see if I could spot him. What I saw was completely unexpected and horrifying. I saw a pair of eyes staring back at me through the tiny holes in the shelf. The eyes moved away, and then the tall man entered the aisle I was in. He was making weird noises, like a child or someone who had just escaped a mental asylum. He started laughing and doing this weird tiptoe kind of hopping toward me. It sounds funny, but it was a straight-up disturbing scene. He was approaching so fast that I actually began to fear for my life. I started walking away from him, and he followed me everywhere in his weird hopping motion. I made it back to the front of the store, ready to call my manager or the cops. Then I looked back at him and saw that he was frozen at the end of the first aisle, maybe 20 feet away from me. His goofy, eerily happy face turned to an aggressive, angry-looking stare of malice. I was officially done with this. I walked out the front door, and to my horror, the man started charging at me. No more goofy hopping around, he was sprinting at me. I ran outside the store, too afraid to go to my car because I feared he'd get me before I could lock the door. I ran around back and entered through the back door, which was still unlocked. I didn't know if he was still on my tail or not. I locked the door and hurried to the front of the store, where I locked the front door too. That was when I picked up the phone on the counter and called my manager, who was luckily still awake. I told him I had to leave immediately because somebody crazy was following me. Then I thought I heard something over my conversation. It was coming from inside the store. I put the phone down and realized it was the tapping again, coming from one of the aisles. I was out of that store and in my car within 20 seconds. I never came back. I called my manager when I got back home, and he called the cops. Surprisingly, nothing was stolen, or so I heard from a friend. My manager obviously wasn't too fond of me for leaving his store like that, so I never spoke to him again. I had as normal of a Christmas as possible, given what happened the day before.